So hello and welcome to the launch of the edited collection by myself and Amy Barron, which is called Aesthetics and the City. And thank you very much for joining us. Firstly, just to acknowledge this event is sponsored by the Manchester Urban Institute and also the Cities, Politics and Economies Research Group in Geography. So thanks very much for joining us. We anticipate that the event will last between an hour and a half. Also, just to note, today's event is hybrid, so I think we had about 70 people signed up online, so there are plenty of people watching us as we speak here. So just to turn over to Amy, who's going to lead us through the plan for today.
Yeah, so the structure of the launch today is kind of structured around the book itself. So Joe and I are going to begin by introducing the premise of the book. And then we're going to share a series of short videos that have been made by each of the contributors. So you're going to get a nice sense of what kind of the book comprises of and what the different chapters bring. And then we're going to summarise with some key take-home points and hopefully have time for some discussion towards the end if you've got any questions that link to your own work or just generally about the collection.
And just to note on that point as well, the contributors are online as participants, so they of course can answer questions too if you've got any for each of the contributors. So by way of an introduction, we just want to talk around the broad scope of the book. So I think the core question that we were considering when we were working on this edited collection was the question of how do we make sense of the city? And I think this is a deceptively simple question that runs throughout each of the chapters. Now, if you ask someone on the street, they might circle somewhere on a map, they might point to an administrative boundary, or describe a dense urban centre, larger and busier than a town or village. Now, with roots in Latin civitas, as a social body of citizens, you might even hear that the city is simply where many people live. And I think the more that you dwell on the question of what a city is and how we make sense of it, the more David Harvey's claim that the city is manifestly a complicated thing rings true.
For urban scholars, however, the city has started to occupy quite an awkward conceptual space. Once the cornerstone of urban thought, it's increasingly decentered, often viewed as a problematic presupposition or assumption about the world. Rather than clarifying social, political, or economic processes, the very idea of the city is therefore often seen as distracting or distorting our understanding of urban phenomena that happen on the ground and the processes that spill beyond conventional city boundaries.
And regardless, I think, of these conceptual arguments and important epistemological cautions, the city nonetheless remains prominent in the popular imagination, shaping and being shaped by everyday life. It remains an integral part of our everyday discourse, our popular imaginaries, and of political systems and visions. So we talk about cities, simply put, we picture them differently, and we make demands of them, even as questions about what the city actually is persist in academic work.
How then might the city be approached in a manner that is sympathetic to the many ways in which they're made meaningful in our lives on the one hand, and then urban studies' more recent hesitation around the concept on the other, where it's seen as at risk of dampening our appreciation for urban life as it unfolds?
So the volume proposes aesthetics as a means to balance presuming too much about the city in advance, and acknowledging the city's role in shaping collective imaginations and individual lives.
But what actually is aesthetics? Well, the term was coined in 1735 by Alexander Gottlieb Baumgarten in the final pages of his master's thesis. Unlike the popular association of aesthetics with beauty, Baumgarten's concept focused on the nature of poetry and our experiences of it. He introduced the term to link episteme, meaning knowledge, with aesthetic from the Greek aesthesis, meaning what is sensed or perceived. So in this sense, aesthetics can be understood as the science of what is sensed, what is perceived, and what is known.
Now, Baumgarten's early death in 1762 left his work on aesthetics incomplete. And whilst the term gained traction, his legacy was somewhat overshadowed by the work of Immanuel Kant, whose first and third critiques also addressed aesthetics. Now, importantly, Kant's work set in motion two strains of aesthetic thought. One emphasizing sensory perception and individual sense-making, focused more on questions of subjective feelings and experiences. This is commonly called aesthesis. And the other framing aesthetics as a matter of common sense, concerned with shared, universalizable standards of things like beauty, the sublime, and taste. This is what is often called sensus communis, or common sense.
So, whilst the city is increasingly de-centred in urban analysis, there's been an uptick in interest in aesthetics at the same time. Moreover, we're far from alone in exploring the role of aesthetics in shaping and reshaping the city. Tersic 2019 observes that only a few urban scholars have linked aesthetics to urban life. For Tersic, aesthetics matter because they push us to ask both what the city is, but also when the city is, a question that this book also takes seriously. Similarly, Vimani in 2021 highlighted that the everyday aesthetic experience of the city is a vital part of the public sphere. Alongside this growing body of aesthetic scholarship, there's a smaller but notable stream of work that's considered often quite implicitly the role of aesthetics in how we experience, order, and remake the city.
So in this collection, we argue that aesthetics offers a lens through which cities can be understood and perhaps even remade. This includes exploring a city's unique sensory experience, what makes a city beautiful, the role of common sense in reordering cities or ordering cities, artistic and aesthetic practices in and around cities, and ultimately the question of what a city is.
So in sum then, we argue that aesthetics offers a way to navigate that tension between avoiding assumptions about the city and acknowledging its role in our collective imagination. Aesthetics in the City engages aesthetics to explore the role of the city in urban experience. Drawing on diverse theories and a range of global case studies, the editor's collection examines how aesthetics relates to how cities and urban spaces are perceived, how they're organised, and how they're transformed. The book really celebrates and ponders the wide diversity of aesthetic approaches within urban studies. And we really note that the way that aesthetics is understood impacts what can be understood about cities and the urban order more generally. So the book also explores how aesthetics intersects with a range of other tangential concepts, including power, the political, art, and affect. And ultimately, in the conclusion, we make the case that it's this diverse ensemble of different approaches to aesthetics that can enable scholars to understand the city better and the enduring relevance of urban thought.
So we're now going to turn over to each of the different contributors and work through the different chapters of the book. And you'll see that each contributor and their co-authors has responded to three questions broadly around the aim of their chapter, how they understand aesthetics, and how this helps them to make sense of the city.